This film has everything. A woman that struggles with showering.
Je crois que c'était la salle de bain.
C'est très direct comme approche.
A very cavalier sense of life and death.
Et l'autre option?
Il faudra décider lequel de nous deux mange l'autre pour survivre.
Fais pas la tronche, t'as pas de suicide de bonheur non plus.
A ball with not enough alcohol. Cigarettes. A misconnections board complete with French/literary yearning. A Ninja Turtles theme one-night stand joke.
Raphaël.
Gabriel.
A super mean and surreal answering machine.
Vous n'avez aucun nouveau message. Cette résidence, et vous nous faites perdre le nôtre.
Writer's block turned into high art. God knows what she likes, and it's bikes, books, and butts. Hi, I'm Kate of Kate and Kat, and I would like to welcome you to the 6th annual Jane Con. Thank you so much to Bianca Hernandez Knight and all of the wonderful volunteers and participants that make this incredible event possible every year. And this year, we are reviewing the 2024 French film Jane Austen, Gâché ma vie. Excuse my French, I took German and Spanish in elementary and high school, so the only French I really know is from the Flight Concord song Fou du Fafa. So in English, this film is called Jane Austen Wrecked My Life. The film is written and directed by French filmmaker Laura Piani. I hope that's the correct pronunciation. The film follows our heroine Agathe, who is a Parisian 20 or 30-something single woman who works at an English language bookstore called Shakespeare and Company, lives with her sister and her nephew, hangs out with her best friend / co-worker Felix. While she is surrounded by people, she's still lonely. As the film points out, she hasn't slept with anyone in 2 years, and that has led her to be so touch-starved that while at her local Chinese restaurant, she hallucinates a man in the bottom of her sake glass. Inspires her to write a short story. Despite having loving friends and family around her, Agathe does find herself feeling quite stuck.
Tu as passé ta vie à faire du vélo sans dépasser le périph'? À répéter que tu voudrais écrire, mais que t'es bloqué, gna 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 gna.
She wants to be a writer, but doesn't know if she has the talent.
Le syndrome de l'imposteur, c'est normal. Arrête, s'il te plaît, allez.
Mais je sais pas, le syndrome d'imposteur, je suis une imposture.
She wants to fall in love, but is a little too scared to try. And throughout the film, we learn how this being stuck is tied to her having gone through a terrible accident about 5 years ago, where she was in a car accident and saw her parents die.
D'accord, je peux pas remonter dans une voiture.
This is real upbeat stuff, isn't it? Came for the Jane Austen, stayed for the tragic car accident. Her best friend Felix realizes that she needs a bit of a kick in the butt to get her out of this rut and going, so he, without her knowledge, submits this work in progress to the Jane Austen residency, and they accept her based on her very promising writing. But in order to get to England, Felix, with the help of some cigarettes, gets her to the port, gets her on a ship. She comes to England, where she is picked up by the young, handsome Oliver, in a moment very similar to meeting Mr. Darcy. They have some car trouble on the way to the retreat and have a little bit of a misunderstanding and have a sort of Lizzie and Darcy meet cute moment.
Non, en plus je suis coincée avec l'arrière petit-neveu de Jane Austen. Non, insupportable. Genre, il se la pète énormément. Méga balai dans le cul.
C'est pas en français, vous savez.
After being stranded overnight, they make their way via apple cart to the beautiful Jane Austen writer's residency. And while there, they slowly start to learn more about each other and fall in love as she struggles and ultimately fails to write anything. Meanwhile, Oliver is dealing with the decline of his father, who has some sort of undiagnosed memory loss, dementia, Alzheimer's sort of situation.
And semantic inventions that are quite frankly...
I can't water the guests.
Where he is frequently roaming around pantsless, quoting poetry, and annoying one of the guests, but endearing himself very much to Agathe, who is reminded very much of her father. The two of them bond over taking care of the father, and in a very French manner, they bond over their shared ennui and terrible life stories.
Je suis très bonne en forade. Palme d'or de la loose.
Je suis retourné vivre chez mes parents, mais mon père se balade le cul à l'air en oubliant mon prénom.
And find a little kinship in one another, which continues to grow and blossom over the rest of the film. Meanwhile, Agathe is not sure about her feelings for Felix. They share their first kiss before she leaves to go on this retreat. After years of friendship, she feels as if she's been ghosted by him.
Félix n'a pas cherché à...
He doesn't respond to any of her texts or calls. and hijinks ensue while Agathe is trying to figure out if she should ruin her friendship with Felix or if Oliver is the right man for her. In the end, Felix surprises her at the ball.
Donc je suis venu pour te déconcentrer et t'accompagner au bal.
Mais pourquoi t'as pas répondu à mes messages?
J'avais simplement besoin d'un petit peu de temps pour atterrir, quoi, tu comprends? Depuis qu'on s'embrassait, je pense qu'à toi, moi, donc.
Where she is feeling torn between these two men that she has very different types of love for.
Your breakfast, Miss Robinson. Shall I leave it on the table?
Oh, no, nonsense, my boy. Leave this to me, thank you very much.
She goes to bed with Felix. This is terrible. She goes to bed with Felix, and it seals their fate as just friends who need to sit next to each other on the couch and eat kebabs. They part very peacefully and lovingly because they have a real strong companionate love, even if they don't have a romantic love to share. Of course, Oliver gets the wrong impression from this, and they have a cold and stressful goodbye as she leaves the retreat early so as not to have to read her writing in public, especially because she has not actually written anything.
Je suis pas faite pour ça. Faut juste que je l'accepte et que je passe à autre chose.
Darling, vous auriez dû nous dire si vous aviez un passage à vide. Nous avons adoré les premiers chapitres de votre roman. Demandez à Oliver.
They have a moment on the cob where she essentially confesses herself to be a fraud at writing, and Oliver, the literature professor, tells her
L'écriture, c'est comme le lierre, comme les mauvaises herbes ou les plantes, ça a besoin de ruines pour pouvoir exister. Cherchez vos ruines.
Inspired by this, in a very persuasion turn, she visits her family's seaside holiday home, which she hasn't been to in 5 years since the accident. And that gives her inspiration to finally write this piece that she's been thinking about. She sends Oliver a postcard to let him know that she found her runes, and then we learn that she has sent the manuscript to a publisher in England who loves it, super enthusiastic about this fact.
Il a beaucoup aimé mon roman.
Trop bien. Bah fais pas la tronche, t'as pas suicidé de bonheur non plus.
She and Oliver fall back into their comfortable role as friends and co-workers. She does find a letter addressed to her on the misconnections board they have at her work, where someone has written her name and then Wentworth's letter in persuasion letting her know that she is very beloved and someone would like a second chance. And the film ends with her hosting an open mic poetry reading at Shakespeare and Company where she works after a very moving poem about love.
Even as you try escaping, let it take you and tear you open like a letter sent, like a sentence inside you've waited for all your life, so you've committed nothing.
She sees Oliver in the crowd, and as the poem finishes, he disappears. She runs outside to find him, and there he is waiting for her, and they kiss. The end. Having just seen the trailer, I wondered if this movie was going to be Austenland the remix. A woman who's stuck and unlucky in love goes to a Jane Austen themed getaway and forms a love triangle and follows the sort of Jane Austen narrative to finding love. And it was, but it wasn't. If Austenland is a movie, then Jane Austen Wrecked My Life is cinema.
La littérature, c'est le seul remède contre le désordre phénoménal de la pensée et des sentiments.
If Austenland is candy floss, then Jane Austen Wrecked My Life is grabbing a handful of cigarettes and smoking them because you're stressed out. Both great, but very different. This may have been my interpretation, but it did have a distinctly French flair. We'll ignore the fact that in the opening scenes, Agathe is dressed up as if she has just dropped out of mime school. But where Austenland is heightened in a whimsical, silly way and relies on classic movie tropes like the glow-up, Jane Austen Wrecked My Life has more of an early 2000s indie movie, Sofia Coppola, lived-in sort of feel, where for the most part everything is very real, down-to-earth, plausible, other than a couple of moments of a very artistic surreality, like when she looks at the bottom of her sake cup and then a naked man appears and they dance as she dreams of what it might be like to touch this man at the bottom of her glass. And I did have to look up what the heck was going on in that scene, because in the film she notes that this happens at her local Chinese restaurant. But apparently the idea is that There's an image at the bottom of your cup. Because of the refraction of the light, you can only really see the image when the cup is full or the cup is empty. Essentially, this was originally designed as a hospitality thing where when the glass is full, you can see the image correctly, so your host knows that your glass needs to be refilled when the image is not visible. And at some point, it went from being an illustration to being 70s era nudie photo, which would be given to you based on your gender, which is why in the film she asks for the ladies' version of the cup and is given that on the house, because initially she receives a cup with a woman at the bottom, and then when she receives a cup with a man at the bottom, she has her delightful hallucination. There's also a delightful moment where she is trying to reach Felix when she's at the retreat and is only getting his voicemail and is worried that he's breadcrumbing her, and her answering machine has this surreal moment of calling her out on everything and basically telling her she's a fraud and she's unloved. And then the final moment of surreality, which is much more sweet, is when she's writing her novel at the very end, and we see an older man's hand touch her shoulder in a loving way, and we know that this is the spirit or the ghost of her father and that trauma being worked out in this writing, and her finally moving past the stuckness of losing her parents so unexpectedly. Part of what led it to feeling like a 2000s indie movie was that the actual video quality was not that high, and especially in one scene when they're on the apple cart heading towards the retreat, they couldn't quite get the lighting correct because there was dappled shadows, and it makes it look like a film that was made 10, 20 years ago versus something that was made 2 years ago. In this instance, it lends a charming, warm, lived-in, real feel that you don't get in a lot of glossy, high-production movies nowadays. So I think it actually works to the film's benefit. So while this film, especially in the trailer and on the back of the box, bills itself as a traditional love triangle a la Jane Austen, it really is its entirely own animal. And we actually invert some of the tropes that we see in Austen. When they were talking about her love for Jane Austen, he asks her what Jane Austen character he would be, and she says,
Henri Crawford, c'est toi, un menteur et un séducteur. Un Casanova d'opérette qui finit par être pris à son propre jeu quand il tombe amoureux.
And much like the onions on the sandwich that he serves her,
C'est le spécialiste de la marinade en fait. Les meufs, les oignons.
because he's in love with love and wants to always see if there's a better option out there. Unlike a lot of other Austen films and novels where we are introduced to a very charming love interest in the beginning, we know straight away that Felix, though he's a wonderful friend, he is an Austen rake and he is not here for the long haul. But he's kind of the inverse of this trope because he immediately is shown to be very focused on sex and romance and wanting to leave his options open.
Qui file des miettes d'attention à chaque fille pour lui laisser l'espoir d'une relation sans jamais vraiment vouloir d'histoire avec elle.
But we also see that Felix is actually a very supportive, caring, and accepted friend. Her sister and nephew absolutely adore him. He does a lot of very kind things like submitting her work and giving her that kick in the butt to get out the door to the writer's retreat, covering for her at work while she's gone, surprising her by coming to this event, and then once they have had their night together and she realizes that they are better off only as friends.
Mais je ressens pas cette petite chimie qui s'explique pas.
Between them, you can tell he's a little bit hurt by it, but when she asks if he's mad at her, he says, no, he's not, and they lovingly flip each other off, and once we see him again when she returns, he genuinely is okay with the fact that they're not together, and he goes back to being just a supportive friend and is perfectly happy to be in that role now that he knows that they don't have a romantic future ahead. They have a really wonderful, well-shown companionate love. They're best friends, but they're not going to be romantic partners, as shown by the nearly surreal, very beautiful, and very indie feeling, what can only be called a post-coital Wes Anderson scene where they are very awkwardly in bed next to one another, having realized that that he is in fact not into nipple play.
Aïe! Tu fais pas ça, là? Ça fait hyper mal, la peau des tétons comme ça va pas.
I will say, this movie also differentiates itself from most of the American and British Jane Austen fare by having about 300% more butt, save for maybe Emma 2020, which had a surprising amount of ass. And it deals with sex a lot more cavalierly. You know, having a one-night stand is not as big of a deal in this film, which is kind of world-rocking when you're used to the hand flex scene from Pride and Prejudice being the height of romance. Having not even your heroine and hero sleep together.
À ta langue dans ma bouche. À ta langue dans ma bouche.
Just a wildly different experience for a Jane Austen movie, but I think also kind of refreshing. I'd probably class this more as an indie movie about Jane Austen than a Jane Austen movie. And the film does seem to be very heavily inspired by Persuasion. It does reference and pick from some of her other novels.
That's Sense and Sensibility. I think it's a good way to start with Jane Austen.
T'attends quoi en fait? Marc Darcy?
But as was mentioned in Jane Austen Book Club, Persuasion has one of her most elegiac tones, as it was like towards the end of her life and she's looking back with a little bit of sadness and sorrow and wisdom. So too does this movie follow a lot of the beats of Persuasion and have the same sort of feel of being older and wiser and looking sadly back at some of the points of your life.
Anne Elliot dans Persuasion, parce que c'est une vieille fille qui s'est fanée comme une fleur qui aurait pas reçu assez d'eau. Elle est consciencieusement passée à côté de son existence.
Person that you want to be. And in Agate's case, that means shedding off these fears about romance and writing and actually doing the thing.
Write the poem.
She finally writes her book. She finally drives in a car. She finally lets go of some of the things she's been holding on to with the sudden death of her parents. And then once she has done all those things, in this movie she follows Anne Elliot's transformation of starting off as a wilted flower in a vase, as she puts it, and working her way to being a competent, in control, confident woman who then finds love. And it seems as though the thesis of this movie is that there is no love without sorrow.
Brokenheartedness is the beginning of all real reception.
No light without dark, that you need to be broken to fully feel the spectrum of human emotions. And that is reflected both in the loss of her parents and romance and writing. She needs to open herself up to being hurt in order to be able to process or do any of these things and stop feeling like a fraud and start acting instead of being frozen. And to me, that is very much parallel to Anne's story, where she has been frozen in her tragedy of losing Wentworth, and then she finally goes out into the world, and actually living her life is what pushes her forward and turns her back into the kind of Anne Elliot that Wentworth fell in love with in the first place. And coming back out into the world is central to the story. There are more visual parallels to Persuasion. For example, they have a emotional damage on the Cobb scene, 1995 Persuasion film. And she does a lot of her writing and healing at this seaside cottage, much as Anne finds herself again in Lyme and kind of finds her power when Louisa has her accident and fall on the Cobb, as that was sort of the impetus to get her going. In this movie, this is where she does her transformation and becomes the kind of person that she wants to be. She stops being an imposter and she starts being a writer. And while I do see the Persuasion through line, a lot of the time when I was watching the movie, I was seeing very clear references to Jane Austen as far as books and quotes and photos, and she's, you know, dating Jane Austen's great-great-grandson at the Jane Austen residency, but it didn't feel as Jane Austen. It's not so much her living the Austen novel romance as her going through the journey of being a writer like Austen. And there are some very interesting discussions about what is the role of writing and literature, and
I believe that some books become part of our lives. They enter our most intimate selves, and some of them move in forever. They help us to live because they reveal to us our true nature. I once heard someone say that literature is like an ambulance speeding through the night to save someone.
That isn't the job of literature.
Why not?
Tu te souviens de ce que disait papa? La littérature, c'est le seul remède contre le désordre phénoménal de la pensée et des sentiments.
Je crois qu'il t'a un peu écrasé, papa, avec ses conneries sur la littérature.
Is it the ambulance speeding through the night to save us? Is it supposed to be for social change? Supposed to show us the hidden parts of ourselves? Is it supposed to grow in the cracks and let us dig through our dirty laundry and turn it into something beautiful? What is the role of writing? Is there a singular role of writing? And we also have some discussions, once again, a la Persuasion, when Oliver says that he, as an English professor, really isn't that interested in Jane Austen. She challenges him on that.
You teach literature, but you despise Jane Austen.
I just think her work is a little overrated. She has a rather limited scope if you compare her writing to, say, Dickens or Shakespeare.
Do you know what the real problem is?
What?
Well, until Jane Austen came along, all female roles were solely written by men. And they were either portrayed as idealized perfection or monsters. Jane Austen made them human beings.
Similar to Anne's conversation.
Let me just observe that all histories are against you. All stories, prose and verse. I don't think I ever opened a book in my life which did not have something to say on women's fickleness.
But they were all written by men.
I suppose so.
All the privilege I claim for my own sex is that of loving longest, when all hope is gone.
Agathe mentions that Jane Austen transformed literature and how the stories of women were told. And yeah, still to this day, a lot of people say, well, it's just a bunch of people in rooms talking, it's just romance, whatever. But there is something powerful about a woman showing the inner life of people experiencing these financial and social stresses and caricatures of different classes and all of these things that are actually quite important and aren't always given credit. And in one more very modern parallel to Persuasion, much like the, 2022 Netflix Persuasion, there's a lot of inexplicable rabbit. Do with that what you will. Another one of the highlights of the film is that it really understands that there is nothing more romantic than a man not talking. It's kind of hard to view this as a romance because although it does make sense for Agathe and Oliver to end up together, the majority of their falling in love is done through longing stares and montages where they don't say that much to each other. So I thought that was an interesting choice. Although also in an extremely French manner, when they do talk to each other and bond, it is talking about how terrible their lives are.
J'ai pas couché avec un mec depuis 2 ans. Je fantasme sur mon verre de saké et je roule des pelles à mon meilleur ami.
La femme que j'aimais m'a trompé avec la quasi-totalité de mes collègues du département de littérature. Hommes, femmes, tout le monde.
I feel like the French have really mastered the art of expressing love by expressing hatred of something. It's a fine art. Just don't go into this expecting it to be a super light and fluffy romance. It's much more introspective and focused on the experience of writing than a lot of traditional Jane Austen romances are. But I think that's really refreshing. I think it's an interesting take. I'm excited to have it in my Jane Austen film collection. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to check out the other wonderful virtual JaneCon videos. And in the meantime, keep hallucinating men at the bottom of your sake cup. Thanks for watching. Who